every business should be measuring their carbon footprint, looking to set emissions reduction targets, and then following through on those emissions reductions and reporting those on a yearly basis, alongside taking climate action and contributing and compensating through climate actions. As long as they have the right intent, then how you communicate that intent is the most important thing.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Growth Leap. I'm your host, Michel Gagnon. We talk to pretty awesome business builders who are designing disruptive and meaningful companies. I am joined by Adam Boita, Chief Marketing Officer at Ecologi, a company dedicated to driving meaningful climate action. Adam brings over 17 years of experience in brand marketing, having worked with major brands like PlayStation, Pernod Ricard UK, and the National Citizen Service Trust. He now leads the charge at Ecologi, inspiring and empowering businesses to accelerate global climate action. We'll be exploring his approach to purpose-driven marketing and how he balances building a strong brand with the demands for measurable results in today's data-driven world. Adam, welcome. How's it going?
Great to be here.
So let's start by talking about Ecologi, making sure people know what it is and what you guys stand for. With so many companies hopping on the sustainability bandwagon, some might view it as just another marketing trend. I'd like to know, how does Ecologi truly stand out in this crowded space, and also what sets it apart from other climate action platforms?
Yeah, the kind of climate action sustainability space is still a very nascent space. It's still very young compared to other industries. And I think Ecologi was one of the first brands in that space when it wasn't so crowded. And I think the one thing that made us stand out was our brand and the way, just the aesthetic, the design. It's very accessible as a brand. And I think the idea from the early days, when it was predominantly a consumer-led brand, was that it needed to be accessible and easy to fund climate action. And that's still one of the top main reasons why our customers come to us today. And then alongside that, when it comes to sustainability and climate action, there's just so many different projects, so many different ways you can fund that you need a trusted guide, making sure that you're funding the highest quality and the highest integrity projects that your budget can buy. So our trust is a huge part of why people come to us. And that's mainly due to the way that we are very transparent in terms of the projects you're buying, where they are, where your dollars are going. We have a public registry where we retire all of our credits that people can go to as of today, see all the carbon avoidance removal, etc. So that has built trust in us as a brand. And then that combined with the design aesthetic, it's not techie, which a lot of maybe our competitors are, but then you also see some of our competitors borrowing some of our more accessible design cues and user and brand experience in terms of their online experiences. So I think brand has always been mentioned in conversations, like, you've got a great brand, that's what attracts to me, your content, etc. So that's what we really try and hold sacred. And I think probably get into this later, but now we're a B2B brand, having come from a kind of consumer-led proposition, where brand is always, I think, considered more important. Taking that into a B2B space has enabled us to continue that strong brand.
If we want to explain a little bit, what is it that Ecologi offers, if somebody would like to partner with you, can you maybe share some of the products or opportunities that people can discover on Ecologi?
Yeah. So overall, we help businesses fund high quality, high integrity climate action as part of their net zero journey, in a nutshell. Our buyer personas range from senior decision makers within marketing, obviously CEOs and MDs, heads of sustainability and chief sustainability officers. And then from a kind of regulation policy compliance, we see operations. And then from a people engagement, we see HR. So our original product, which was a consumer subscription product, which helped you take climate action as an individual for yourself or for your family and pets, depending on whether or not you were a frequent flyer or you're a heavy traveler, you could increase or decrease your levels of contribution. That was then flipped into a climate action workforce for employees. If you're an HR persona and you want to start building your employer brand, and we know a lot of the workforce, Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, whoever is coming to the workforce, want to work for more purpose-driven organizations that take DE&I, ESG a lot more seriously. This was a way to enable them to talk about, join our company and we instantly fund climate action on your behalf, because it means a lot to us, in addition to maybe other climate action initiatives that we're doing, measuring our footprint, decarbonization, that kind of thing. And then we have an API product. So for e-commerce owners or people who have product and services online, which allows you to fund climate action, that could be planting a tree, It could be offsetting carbon with every order. That allows that to kind of seamlessly work. So we have a Shopify plugin as well as like Zapier and then a custom API depending on how advanced you are in terms of integrating climate action within your online offering. We also have a pay-as-you-go impact shop, which allows you to select the projects or a bit more of an expert and you know exactly what you want and the carbon price you need. Then you can go to our impact shop and purchase impact there. Anything from carbon avoidance, carbon removals, nature-based restoration. And then we've recently launched impact funds, which are carefully curated funds that bring together multiple projects into one fund. So you don't need to worry about selecting multiple projects. We've done the hard work for you. And what it allows you to do is, first off, fund multiple projects in one go. Secondly, allows you to spread your risk. No project is without risk, but it lowers the risk of those projects delivering the benefits that they need to. And it also maximizes your impact. So we have a forest and reforestation and landscape reforestation restoration fund. We have a UK climate and nature fund. We'll have other funds coming online. So ocean, for example, carbon removals in the future. And then obviously, if you're like a slightly bigger organization, enterprise, FTE, 100 plus to 1,000, then, you know, a lot of those businesses will speak to our commercial and impact and sales teams to make sure that they get the kind of custom climate action, depending on where they are in their climate journey, what they want to do. They want to compensate for their emissions, so they want to contribute to global climate action. So that's a whole myriad of kind of scenarios there. But
I want to get into your specific marketing expertise and experience, but just before, I'd like to discuss about what you've seen over the past 2-3 years. I think you've been with Ecologi for almost 3 years now. And from my standpoint, from Germany, I've seen quite a bit happening, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've heard a lot, especially with carbon credits, a bit of a scandal maybe 2 years ago around companies who were maybe double counting, things like this. I'd like to get your view. How do you see things moving? Because initially you said that it's still a nascent space, let's call it like that. But a lot of things have happened over the past couple of years. So what's your take on this? Like, what have you observed? But also, how do you see things progressing in terms of, I don't know, maybe regulations, but also what from people and companies approaching you?
Yep, sure. Yeah, it's been nearly 3 years that the Ecologi, no, nearly 4 years actually, the Ecologi has been around. And since that time, we've accumulated 24,000 businesses, 40,000 members, planted over 80 million trees, avoided 3 million tons of carbon. So we're proud of that track record. And I think that track record wouldn't be possible without, like I said, one of the key tenets is the due diligence that we do around our projects. We use the industry standards like Gold Standard, Verra, Puro, but only as a starting point. And then we have a whole other layer of due diligence that our impact team, climate experts, we also have an independent climate committee that helps steers us. We have a impact regionalization strategy. And we've also just developing internally a kind of quantitative formula that we put all of our projects through to make sure they're not only delivering what they set out to deliver, but also making sure that they have co-benefits, they hit the UN SDGs. So I think, yes, there has been controversy within the markets, most notably The Guardian calling out worthless carbon credits and phantom credits and double counting, all of that kind of stuff that you talk about. And I think, you know, the industry does need to improve, does need to, you know, evolve. As you say, it's a nascent industry versus other more highly regulated industries like the finance industry, for example. But the kind of carbon credit market is no different. And there are many different initiatives that are going on in order to improve that. And we fully support that. But as a player within the sphere, it's not just obviously carbon credits, it's not non-carbon based projects, which don't necessarily fall into that issue. But from our point of view, yeah, we're very confident in our due diligence and assessments of projects. And out of all the projects we've ever funded, I think only one has ever failed. And in that instance, we replaced all of the credits for that particular customer. Yeah, we're proud of that track record.
As of today, as we're recording this, you launched a brand new campaign. That is pretty cool. I just saw. So we'll make sure people have the access to the link so they can see it. What I've seen from that campaign is a short video, and you basically have this, I don't know, management meeting happening. And I think the CEO potentially is asking what's going on with our net zero strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about the idea, also what's happening and how you came up with this specific campaign?
Yeah, I think, communicating climate change is, as I think as Sir David Attenborough said, communicating climate change is now like the biggest challenge. And it's such a challenge for communicators that kind of work within this space. You can do fear-based advertising, you can do emotional advertising. But I think with this particular campaign, and it's something we've seen work, we did last year at COP29, we did a collaboration with Cassette Boy where we started to lean into the wittiness and trying to expose the double standards that were happening. Politicians are saying one thing and then not delivering the other. And I think humor and wit, particularly when there's a lot of doom scrolling around the climate, fear-based advertising doesn't work. And one of our tenets in terms of our tone of voice is being real, positive and inspiring. And so with this campaign, we wanted to be real, positive, inspiring, but also witty. And also just shine a light on our buyer personas effectively and our audience. They're not doing anything wrong. They want to do good. They may have some excuses, but they don't know how to overcome the barriers of time, resource, knowledge, access to the right resources to make that happen. Fear of greenwashing, taking climate action, but then not communicating in the right way and then it having a backlash. But we know that all of the benefits of taking climate action for businesses are there, increased brand reputation, competitive advantage, attracting new customers, attracting and retaining existing staff and employees in terms of that kind of engagement. And then also most recently, we're seeing a lot of times being compliant with RFPs or tenders or even kind of government procurement frameworks that this is now a requirement either via social value or through a carbon reduction plan. We wanted to shine a light on the type of conversations that we know are probably going on in all businesses, but in a light-hearted and witty way to kind of break down those barriers and actually say, look, companies like Ecologi can help you on that journey. It's all about taking that first step and the kind of rest will follow. And it sits obviously very much in terms of, if we're talking like a brand versus performance, this is clearly an awareness campaign, top of funnel, creating intrigue around just the name Ecologi. And then obviously we're always underpinned by, we have a set of 4 values. One of the first value is planet first, where we're science-led and impact-driven. And so all of the content that then sits underneath this brand campaign is all about explaining people the difference between compensation or contribution or climate adaptation versus climate mitigation, or how you need to go beyond carbon neutral, how to go beyond carbon offsetting, the powers of trees and what trees can deliver. So all of that kind of educational piece sits underneath that. But this for us was just, the kind of North Star of where we can help and take businesses.
And how do you plan a campaign like this? If you want to break it down, and I know you've been doing this for years, especially for B2C brands who usually have a lot more budget than a B2B company. If you just want to give us a simple overview of when you're planning a campaign, what are the key deliverables that you're thinking about, the objectives, maybe budget, and also how do you measure, let's say, the effectiveness of that campaign?
Yep. So I think we start off with our kind of yearly top-down and bottom-up build revenue perspective. I help run the kind of the growth team. So that's made up of sales, marketing, and partnerships. And so we're all targeted on revenue ultimately, but revenue also equals impact that we can have on the planet. So it's really nice to be able to tie commercial gains for planetary gains effectively. And so we'll look on that. We'll work backwards in terms of the amount of leads over particular FTE size. So we target leads over 50 within a certain quality score, within a certain industry. We then look at conversion to SQL, conversion to close one deal, work backwards on that for a general cost per lead and the ceiling that we want to hit. And then ultimately that delivers the kind of performance marketing budget overall that we need to deploy. And then within that, we then look at it and say, what's the split between performance budget and brand budget? And we followed best practice, B2B, LinkedIn Institute. It's very well known. Obviously depends on the industry, but broadly it's a 45% split between brand and 55% split between lead generation. And then we work with our media agency to determine the best channels for both those. So typically for lead gen, it will be linked to Meta. Yeah, that's it from a lead generation perspective, and LinkedIn obviously. And then from a brand awareness point of view, we look at programmatic video, YouTube pre-rolls, LinkedIn again, actually experimenting with TikTok for business as well. We've got a very small line in there that seems to be quite impressive compared to Meta at the moment. And then we're also going on Sky AdSmart with the campaign. They've got a really great VOD targeting around sustainability, key decision makers within businesses. Ideally, you want to be on 3, ideally 4+ channels in order to create the oscillation between brand and performance. And ultimately, all of the research shows that if you're driving brand, it makes your performance work harder because otherwise you'll just reach a bit of a glass ceiling on performance. And I think a lot of B2B companies maybe realize that too late and they max out their performance and then realize that leads are slowing down and cost per lead are going up. And actually then they're like, we need to invest in brand, when actually if you invest in brand up front, we know the payback is a lot longer, 3-6 months, but ultimately it should make that performance work harder. So in terms of the metrics that we would measure for brand awareness, it would be reach and impressions, video views, and then engagement, be that likes, shares, reposts, comments. And then obviously for lead generation, we still have engagement parts of the funnel, traffic retargeting, and ultimately it's resulting in form fills and conversions and click.
You've mentioned that, or I've mentioned that you used to work on the B2C side. That's something I'd like to build on a little bit or dig deeper, let's say. Your initial roles were really focused on the big B2C world. What have you noticed when you transitioned to a B2B marketing role? What were the big differences, let's say, and potentially things that you had to adapt a little bit in your approach?
Yeah. First and foremost, I think I like B2B more now. I'm in it, firmly in it. I think it's because there's a lot more accountability and a lot more trackability in terms of the performance of your campaigns. For the brands I work with, where PlayStation was selling boxes, wasn't really even online. You could buy them online, obviously, through websites, but a lot of the volume went through retail outlets. So there's a lot of trade marketing. And so you couldn't get that kind of like one-to-one relationship by, I put this in the marketing funnel here and I get X out. It was very much about, becoming culturally relevant, becoming a cool lifestyle brand that people wanted to buy into. And then people would purchase the games off the back of that. PlayStation was the first gaming console to put consoles in the Ministry of Sound and be kind of aligned with the kind of music generation, aligned with the festival generation, aligned with the fashion generation. And it became more than just a gaming. It became a kind of lifestyle badge versus Xbox, which was still very Microsoft, very techie, very kind of computer kind of nerd style thing. And the same thing with Absolut, really. Again, we were selling bottles of alcohol primarily through the on-trade, which is beers, which is pubs and bars, the impulse channel, which was convenience channel, like corner stores, and then through the off-trade, which is like groceries, like Tesco, Asda, all that kind of stuff. And so again, the kind of relationship between marketing input here and output there wasn't always there. And again, a lot of trade marketing. But time and time again, people always came back to, we buy into the Absolut brand because I saw the great collaboration you did for that limited edition with Jamie Hewlett from the Gorillaz, or a great piece of marketing you did with that particular music artist and the concert that you put on. Remaining culturally relevant for all of those brands was super important for the sales guys to have a differentiator effectively when it came to negotiations, and the power of the brand was the one thing. Ultimately, yes, some vodkas are better than others and there are reasons for that, but ultimately the differentiation in the consumer's mind comes from differentiation in brand and what it stands for and what, I guess, tribe they're aligning themselves to. But then when we got into NCS, which is both targeting 16 and 17-year-olds, but also their parents. So who are the kind of decision makers ultimately as to whether or not they could go on. So for those of you who don't know, NCS was and still is, one of the UK's leading youth programs. It runs a summer camp effectively for anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks, where young adults learn skills that they don't necessarily learn in school, resilience, just those kind of life skills. And that was where I had my first taste of proper performance marketing, where we were trying to get expressions of interest and then push them through the funnel. We had a sales force, we had emails. You're targeting both decision makers and the teens. So again, from that perspective, you're trying to make that brand culturally relevant, understand the mindset of teens when they're in that really important transition into adulthood. And, we had econometrics. We had a very extensive econometrics looking at the power of TV versus social versus online versus out of home, how those metrics work in order to deliver those expressions of interest and ultimately sign-ups to the camp at the end of the campaign season.
I want to keep going on this because you've mentioned a couple of times you want to build a brand, you want to make it culturally relevant. When you get into B2B, I think a lot of our audience or a lot of entrepreneurs in general tend to focus, they fall into the trap of explaining the features or how they do something or how the product is helping you get there. The storytelling very frequently is missing. And I think when you look at big enterprise software, obviously these things are not as sexy as an Absolut vodka or a PlayStation. So I'm interested in your experience and maybe how you've taken that storytelling into the B2B world, but also any advice that you have for our audience on how they can potentially think about the brand messaging a bit differently.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can borrow from the B2C playbook. And I think that's one of quite often the themes I see in lots of B2B, either events or podcasts, borrowing from the B2C playbook. And I think that one of my mentors, Mark Chouecki, who wrote the book From Boring to Brave, it's all about taking those brave choices and trying to think a bit left field and do something that is iconic, that is unexpected within your category. We see this in consumer marketing all the time. Who thought that loo roll could be an exciting category, but it took Who Gives a Crap to suddenly come up with a brand and then suddenly, alongside sustainability and purpose driven, that disrupts the category. So I think there's so much opportunity in what you would term quite boring enterprise software solution markets, but there's always an opportunity to swim against the tide and be a little bit different and get noticed. And that, I guess that's what brand can help do, help that differentiation, help become that top of mind brand that you would choose when you're in your kind of discovery phase and then into your buying phase and then when you're actually in market to buy. We often talk about the 95% and the 5%. That brand is nurturing that 95% so that when they are in that 5% buying mode, then they're more likely to buy from you than someone else. You still obviously absolutely need to think about the pain points and how you're solving those and how your product overcomes those barriers for that particular persona for sure. But I think that sits more in the kind of consideration piece once you dazzle them, entertain them with maybe some kind of brand marketing.
But do you have some sort of a process, or it's more like Madman style where you have your cigar and you just come up with that next big idea? Or since you've done that quite a few times before, I don't know, there are a couple of things, or you have maybe a framework with a couple of buckets that help you think about those things?
Yeah, I've always tried to distill brand essence into what I call a brand compass. And at the heart of that, the first thing is around consumer or buyer insights. What is your audience thinking and phrasing it in terms of what are they thinking? So if it's an HR persona, it's like, how do I build my employee brand and attract and retain great talent? If it's a salesperson, it's how is this going to help me sell more and hit my monthly sales targets? If it's a marketeer, it's how is this going to let me align this with our brand story and build our brand and build our brand reputation in this space? So we start with those kind of pain points or what the particular persona is thinking. And then I look at what I call the brand platform. So this is the platform that is like a universal truth. It's like the Nike Just Do It or the kind of 3-word phrase. Ecologi's one is both centered in the original brand story, which is the original 3-4 co-founders that were doing it for their children, for the planet. And then from a business perspective, yes, they want to be able to take climate action and grow their business at the same time, but they know in their heart of hearts that they're doing this for our planet. So the brand platform Ecologi is always laddering up to for our planet. It's the kind of universal truth as to why we're doing this, alongside all the amazing business benefits, alongside all of the pain points that we help solve. But it's that kind of like higher purpose that we all buy into. So once you've got that strong brand platform, that allows you to then hook other campaigns on. So for example, for us, it's a very modular platform because we can say, take climate action, build your business for our planet, or no more excuses for our planet. So for us, it's been a very flexible brand platform where we can talk about things, but still tie it back to our universal truth. And then obviously layering onto that, we have our tone of voice, real positive, inspiring. We have a kind of brand experience. How do we want our experience online and our experience with our sales teams to be human, empathetic, those kind of things. And so you can build up this picture and have it on kind of like a one-pager that kind of guides all communications moving forward.
And maybe if we look back, what kind of mistakes that you may have made or that you've observed or witnessed over your career or maybe you just launched your campaign and others doing it as well. What are the top 3 mistakes that you always see where you say, why are they trying this? We know it's not performing or it's not going to work.
It's a good question. I think focus is probably one of the things that's the hardest to do, and not spreading yourself too thinly. When I first came into Ecologi, we had so many different features and products. We have Ecologi Zero, which is a carbon accounting software that plugs into your Zero that gives you calculates your footprint and then looks at how you can then reduce those emissions and produce a report. We have the climate action workforce for employee engagement. We have the pay-as-you-go impact shop. We have the API e-commerce plugin. We have the new impact funds. We have obviously even a consumer proposition. So climate positive individual, climate action individual. And so we were spreading our budget across all of those different products. And actually, when we looked at it, we were thinking about, what's the biggest growth lever? And actually was assisting the sales team because that's where the biggest value was to be derived. And so we then really focused around the kind of broader brand strategy of Ecologi. The broader part of wherever you are in your climate journey will help meet you there and take you on the next step. And so just that kind of, sometimes I see not enough focus and where you're going to spend your money and get the greatest return on investment. And that takes time, that takes testing and learning, seeing what isn't working, but slowly narrowing that down, I think is my biggest lesson I've seen.
If we go back to sustainability, there's a lot of discussions around greenwashing. or greenwashing, and you're in the middle of it. And I think your campaign is super interesting because I've been in that room where you want to make a difference. You try to find the best path to have that impact, but there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of priorities. What are you seeing at the moment? Maybe the customers that you have different needs today or different asks than 2-3 years ago. What's the trend?
I think that the main thing is how you communicate what you are doing. If you're, say, funding climate action for every sale, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily suddenly turn you into a super sustainable organization, depending on what product you're selling. So it is about how you communicate and why you're doing it and what it represents. Every business should be measuring their carbon footprint, looking to set emissions reduction targets, and then following through on those emissions reductions and reporting those on a yearly basis, alongside taking climate action and contributing and compensating through climate actions. As long as they are doing something else or they have the right intent, then how you communicate that intent is the most important thing, and not to over-egg what you're doing if you're not really following through with your decarbonization efforts. We have a business toolkit which provides guidelines and assets that our businesses can use. We follow the Green Claims Code and the Advertising Standards Authority, and we also have links to those particular guidances within our toolkit. And then if people have a question, they can obviously reach out to our customer success team and we can help them there as well.
One thing that you and I talked about in our first chat was technology and AI and blockchain and everything else. I'd like to understand a bit over the years how you've approached these new technologies and also how it has changed or not changed, like the work that you do as a CMO.
I've always said that technology is an enabler, not necessarily the thing that's going to solve everyone's problems. And I think you've got to start out with what problem and pain do I have? And could this piece of technology or something else actually solve that problem with me? I have a friend who's got a great podcast called Shiny New Toy, and it's all about marketeers chasing the latest shiny new toy, shiny new platform without asking themselves, is the audience there? What they care about is actually solving the pain point and the challenge and the problem that I have. So, when it comes to AI, I think that, or any new platform is just test and learn at a very small scale and see if it's worth. We've been evaluating a number of different AI tools, Dojo AI, Copy AI, AdsAct, which is a great kind of matching platform with using machine learning. But we're only ever going to test and learn and then see if that's potential, then incorporate it into our tech stack or within our campaign.
I'd like to learn more about your career. If you could tell us the story of how you are the short version before we print it, but of how you've navigated like PlayStation to landing at Ecologi where you are, like what has been a bit, your guiding principle or how you've navigated these different roles?
I think the spark was when I was 15 and I saw a TV program which was featuring, I think it was JWT, so J. Walter Thompson, which was one of the ad agencies, big ad agency, still going, I think, today at the time. And it was an account manager or account planner on the set of the latest kind of like car advert. And I thought that looks really cool. And so I initially really liked the creative side, thinking about becoming an art director or copyright. And in those days, there wasn't really an email. So you just basically had to write letters or fax or phone up the HR department and try and get work placements. So I got work placements in Abbott Mead Vickers 2 years in a row, J. Walter Thompson. So that kind of started me down the kind of advertising and marketing route, really. And then I decided I wanted to study that at university. So I studied that at Bournemouth. And then as part of that Bournemouth uni, there was a 6-week to 8-week placement that you had to secure. Luckily for us, one of the students in the year above us had already gone to New York to work for Grey Advertising. So we applied to be on their internship program, so myself and another friend, Jonathan Tapper, who's now, I think, at Saatchi's. And we went on that kind of 6 to 8 week program in New York. One of the best times of our lives, working for a great ad agency and also experiencing New York at the same time. And then when I graduated, I was just temping in the PR department at Sony, just through a temp agency, and got to know some of the people. And then there was a junior product manager role going. I applied for it, got the role, and that's what started me on my career today. So I was at PlayStation for 7 years, and then I found Pernod Ricard and Absolute Vodka. So there was a marketing manager for Absolute going there. And then I was there for 7 years. And then, was looking for other opportunities, fell into NCS. It seemed like a great purpose-driven brand. I think Absolute was the first brand that really introduced me to purpose, working with the LGBT plus community, working with the artistic community. And so therefore working for NCS was another kind of purpose for the kind of young generations. And then obviously now Ecologi. And whilst at NCS, I was doing some consultancy work for Ecologi because one of the co-founders was a friend of mine that I knew from PlayStation days. he said, could you come help and do a little bit of consultancy around the marketing plan and how we set up budgets? And then I did that for 6 months. And then I was like, I love what Ecologi is doing. I think I was the 100th member that signed up to support them from a consumer subscription perspective, saw them grow, saw them crowdfund, and then wanted to join that journey. So I guess my red thread has been entertaining a generation for 7 years, entertaining them in a different way through booze and partying and events and music and all that, and culturally relevant events at Pernod Ricard. NCS was about making young people more resilient and preparing them for the world of work that they're going to go into. And then now it's about protecting the planet that they're going to inherit and hopefully work for many more years to come. Yeah, it was like a nice red thread. I always say, what's your red thread as you go through Eco? That's
great. There's so much information out there these days. Like if you are a young entrepreneur, a young marketing professionals, or an entrepreneur as a whole, or startup founders, it's really easy to get lost. With the experience that you have, how would you define like a good CMO? What makes a good CMO from a bad one?
I think the kind of marketing of old was great campaigns, do cool stuff, and sometimes have no accountability, if I'm honest. But I think the CMO of today has to be commercially driven, has to be numbers literate. Pernod Ricard, my portfolio had whatever it was, 10 different P&Ls that would add up to a spirits portfolio of P&L. You can't spend it until you've earned it. You can't go and do the cool, good marketing stuff that you want to do until you've built the P&L, what your contribution is after A&P, the business. Yeah, that commercial discipline is something that I really learned at Pernod Ricard. The performance marketing side is something that I really learned at NCS because we had Salesforce, very sophisticated CRM program, and obviously the econometrics to understand what worked and what could increase our numbers year on year. PlayStation is where I learned my kind of cultural relevance. I also learned that at Pernod Ricard with the likes of Absolut and working on very culturally relevant brands. So yeah, I think you need to be creative, you need to be a great communicator, but you also need to have great commercial acumen. And ultimately, marketing should be seen as a growth driver alongside sales and partnerships and a contributor to the business, not just as my old boss would say, that doing the coloring in function. In order for marketing to have a seat at the table in the future, it needs to be able to produce demonstrable results whilst also building a brand, which doesn't always become demonstrably, especially as we know the long and short of it, long-term brand building versus short-term sales targets. Navigating that and balancing that is always going to be a difficult act, especially if you're answering to a CEO or to the board.
I don't want to take too much of your time, but I think I have a couple of other questions. One would be, if we go back to what you just said, right? When you joined Ecologi 2-3 years ago, how did you get started? Like, how did you organize yourself? How did you identify like the key priorities that you had to really push back then?
How do we plan on a quarterly basis for Ecologi?
No, I'm more interested in when I became a global managing director of a net tech company. It took me a while to promote myself mentally and say, okay, I used to do this. I used to be really hands-on. Now I need to see the opportunities, see where there's friction that I should remove so that my team can get the job done. So when you move from NCS to Ecologi, I know you've done some consulting, so maybe you already knew where to go, but how did you do your diagnosis and say, look, these are the things that I really need to push, clarify, or focus on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As part of the consultancy work, we did a deep dive across all of the different aspects of the kind of marketing chain with the CRM team, work with the social team, work with the commercial team. And I did like stakeholder interviews to build up a real picture of what was going on in the company, what each of those stakeholders wanted to get out of that. So I had a really good picture from that perspective. And then that helped me build that kind of bigger picture. I think the one thing that kind of pushed all of that to one side was within the first 3 months, the business made the pivot for B2B only. And so learning the B2B craft, borrowing what was great from the original plan, borrowing kind of from the best of the B2C playbook, but understanding the B2B guardrails, and then seeing where we needed to focus. So again, we were spreading ourselves too thinly. It took a good 3 to 6 months to really understand, because Ecologi has quite a varied, different business model just because of the evolution of the brand. It's got semi-subscription, it's got a potential SaaS product, it's got API revenue coming in, it's got all various different kind of business models and revenue streams, and that makes it quite complicated to unpick those all and create a cohesive view of where we need to push. We did all of that, and then we focused, like I said, more on assisted sales as a kind of growth lever, because it meant that we could sell our entire product suite, but to one particular buyer persona buying committee rather than maybe the kind of self-serve, bringing in slightly smaller companies that would have a slightly lower average order value. And therefore with assisted sales, we could increase that and have the same kind of product set. So yeah, it definitely takes time to bed in. And then also really building the right dashboard of metrics that you can go to. Whereas one of the first things I did was, had HubSpot over here. We had some reporting here. We had some subscriptions there, actually bringing in on a weekly basis in a Google spreadsheet, how many pay-as-you-goes, what is each one of those worth, how many subscriptions, what's in this, totaling that up, seeing what the weekly ROAS would be, seeing where we need to make those optimizations, lead quality, lead scoring. We had started adding that all in and kind of building those foundations. And that gave us like a master dashboard from which to pick where we were going to then focus. Data is your friend, and how you interpret it is how you make those decisions.
Let's just talk about lead scoring, because I just heard that, and that's not the next question I wanted to ask you, but since you mentioned it, can you tell me a bit about how you do this at Ecologi?
Yeah, there's lead scoring actually within HubSpot. So it has a couple of fields within there, and we look at things like amount of pages that person has viewed, what industry they're from, what job title they're from, the size of company, the inferred annual revenue from, I think, Zoom Info as a plugin on HubSpot. Yeah, typically we try and aim for leads with a lead quality over 8 or 9. And when I first came in, we were just like any MQL over 20 is fine. And the kind of lead score was 6. And slowly over the years, we focused more on upmarket and leads over 50. Consistent like lead quality score went from 6 to 9, with only maybe a 10 to 20% drop off in like total leads. So it was all about improving quality of leads as we move forward there.
My last question is, if you could give an advice to somebody who'd like to follow, let's say, your path, or to somebody who'd like to build a business that looks a bit like Ecologi, what kind of advice would you have for them from a marketing standpoint?
Very good question. I think thinking brand first and the type of brand that you're going to build with this particular product or service. I think quite often people overlook the value of, you can pay £5 and have a new logo designed. But the fact is, if that's your solution to building a brand on top of the product or service you think you want to launch, then I don't think you're going to build a strong brand. And it takes a real insight of the audience, a real pain point, how that product solves that particular pain point, and then how that brand brings that to life beyond just the kind of the rational, what emotional lens does that brand add to that product service that ultimately will serve you and your business for the long term.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam, for your time. Appreciate
Welcome.
We should meet eventually. I wish you all the best with Ecologi. We'll make sure that the audience has access to that new campaign. It's pretty funny, pretty insightful. So thanks a lot, and all the best.
You too. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and as usual, you can find the show notes at stunana.com.